blame minorities of escalating tensions between
Oh my god! They said this video may be inappropriate. YouTube gave me a warning. I hope YouTube doesn't like demonetize me because they gave me.
This video is part 2 of a free
What is
part
so
series.
inappropriate of this video from Crowd?
In the description.
I'm curious now. How is this video inappropriate? We already talked about the inappropriate stuff like the Armenian genocide. So how could this be inappropriate? The Turkish Century, the journey of the Republic.
There is this rumor, especially in more left-leaning circles, that Turkey was at the brink of joining the Nazis in the Second World War.
Okay.
Which simply isn't true. The origin of that myth is the Soviet Union and Soviet propaganda. In Stalinist propaganda movies, Turks are often depicted as devious, backstabbing schemers helping the Nazis behind the backs of everyone while pretending to be neutral. The reason for this open hostility
Okay, I can see why YouTube gave me this warning that this video might be inappropriate.
By the Soviets is, however, rather simple. All state entities inherit the geopolitical ambitions of the entities they replace, and the Soviet Union is no different. Just like its predecessor, it couldn't help but have a desire for Istanbul. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the Kremlin archives revealed that Stalin was actually negotiating with Hitler for permission to invade Turkey and divide it up with him, just as they had done with Poland. What Stalin didn't know is that when he started these negotiations, Hitler was already planning the invasion of the Soviet Union. By and large, the Second World War was uneventful for Turkey. It accepted droves.
Okay, so let's pause here and discuss this real quickly, okay? You notice how after the fall of the Soviet Union, you know, the Kremlin was just revealed all the archives of the Soviet Union. Okay, it's because the Soviet Union had nothing to do with Russia, right? I need to emphasize this because people just, and I will always emphasize this until the day that I die. But people need to understand like the difference between the Soviet Union and Russia for goodness sakes. Okay, like these countries were two different countries. Okay, like if the Soviet Union was Russia, I'm sure the Kremlin wouldn't freaking reveal these archives at all.
Of Jewish refugees,
especially archives like this,
for a potential invasion. But by and large, it had other things in mind. Something, however, did appear briefly that would years down the road cause more trouble. When Hitler invaded the Soviet Union, a group of Turkish fascists emerged to proclaim the need for Turkey to join the Nazis and conquer Central Asia to create a Turkish empire for a Turkish race. These people, led by the then unknown Alparslan Türkes, were considered to be an annoyance and nothing more. Ataturk's successor, İsmet İnönü, didn't appreciate this rabble and had them sentenced to several years of hard labor and went back to working on rebuilding the Turkish society. The continuing Soviet hostilities towards the Republic led to the government abandoning one of Ataturk's changes to the state. They abandoned neutrality and allied themselves with the United States and by that extent the Western Bloc. The Soviet Union added an additional roadblock to the advantages of the Anatolian geography. That geography is very inviting to tie deeper connections into the Balkans and the Black Sea coastline. Romania, for example, has the Carpathian Mountains separating it from the European heartland, and the long distance from Crimea through the Russian frontier gave whoever inhabited Anatolia the opportunity to exert power over it. With the Cold War, that potential sphere of influence and trade was gone. Turkey needed to search for outsiders and chose the United States. In exchange for 2 military bases on Turkish soil, the Turkish army received massive financial aid and American weapons. Turkey was to be the southern bulwark against the Soviet Union, and many forget today that from the 1950s to the 1980s, Turkey had the second largest and second strongest military in NATO. This increased the power of the military as a political force within the state. Ataturk's economic policies had been mainly left-wing,
That's insane.
And these policies became cornerstones of his party,
insane.
the Republican People's Party. In later years, he started reforms within the country's social system and economy, which would shape the Republican Party into becoming the center-left, secular, social democratic party that it is today. Organized labor unions, national industries, state-subsidized economic reforms in agriculture and industry, a progressive taxation system, as well as a social welfare and security net. In Turkey, the 1940s were dominated by the implementation of these social and economic reforms until something got in the way, that pesky democracy that Ataturk wanted to achieve. Let's get back to the previously mentioned Erziehungsdiktatur. Harald Neubert, the man who coined that term, was a socialist. Now, before you turn off, try to stick around, because despite the political objections you may have to his beliefs, Harald Neubert was actually onto something. He himself wanted to figure out why socialism failed in the 20th century, so the socialists of the 21st century could learn lessons on how not to fail again. He wrote,
"The dictatorship of the class became the dictatorship of the party, and ultimately the dictatorship of the leadership. According to Marx, on the other hand, it should be the power of the vast majority of society, the proletariat. Under these conditions, the Soviets lost their importance as original revolutionary democratic organs of power. The party assumed their function. Under Stalin's influence, Marxism was degraded to an interest-led ideology with the primary purpose of justifying its practical politics with its pragmatic twists and wrong decisions. The current crisis of traditional Marxism-Leninism is that it was ultimately only of limited use in perceiving the world as it was and as it is. With all the plurality, it is necessary to build forms and principles of building consensus on strategic and programmatic questions, and for the purpose of uniformability. What should the principles of a new internationalism in contrast to the previous communist movement be? Above all, a pluralist constitution of the international movement or common left party, equality and autonomy of each party, democratic consensus building, openness, critical solidarity."
So, Harald Neubert's political beliefs derived from a historic analysis.
Okay, let's talk about communism a bit. Yeah, people who are kind of brainwashed by American propaganda will often say like, "Oh, communism has never worked out, bro. Communism has never worked." And honestly, it's like more nuance to it than that, right? Like I said this before, and I'll say it again. Yeah, I don't blame people for being communist. I don't. There's a bunch of stuff actually that today exists, like the 8-hour workday. That is left-leaning socialism ideology. Now, socialism and communism are two different things, but I'm just saying, like, the 8-hour work week exists because of these people from the left, and communism is like far left. But again, it's still the left, nonetheless. You see where I'm going with this, right? So, whenever I hear people say like, "Oh my goodness, communism bad," everything about communism is bad, bad, bad. Anything about the left is bad. Socialism bad, bad, bad. You're like ignorant as hell, because the common argument that people like to say is, "Oh my goodness, but communism, bro, communism doesn't work. Communism always turns into something other than fucking what it's supposed to intend to." And guys, I'm not a communist, but I understand communist people, okay? Like, I understand them very much, okay? Do not think I'm a communist. My common rebuttal to that is very simple, actually. Capitalism really and truly doesn't work either. Capitalism usually just turns into some type of oligarchy. It's funny how like that double standard exists, where people will say like, "Oh, communism doesn't work because it turns into something than the original purpose of communism," but they also forget that capitalism, technically, if we use that logic, also doesn't work because it turns into something that is not the original purpose of capitalism. So, and what do I mean by that? Look at America. America's like the most hyper-capitalist. Honestly, calling it hyper-capitalist is just wrong, because it has become so capitalist that it's not even capitalist anymore. Okay, America is just ran by a freaking bunch of corporations, and literally, America is just a horrible oligarchy now. And that's literally the end result of capitalism. Like, eventually, a few people or a few companies are just gonna buy everyone out to that there's just gonna be no more competition, which is the original purpose of capitalism, to have competition. Ain't no competition when everyone is bought out, right? So if there is no competition, well, now you have an oligarchy-led system, and that's the end result of capitalism. This is why everyone is struggling in America, unless you have money. And if you have money, you are an oligarch. That is a fact, okay? Like, and then the same people who are struggling, complaining that, "Oh, I don't get paid enough. I have to work my butt off. Oh, I can't retire. Guys, it's literally been shown that most Gen Z people will not be able to retire. Yeah, that's how bad it is right now. Yeah, that's capitalism for you folks. All right, it's capitalism in America. I'm not sure what other countries, but America is like the prime example of this. Because when we think capitalism, we think United States of America, right? So, it's like whenever I hear communism, I'm like, I'm open to it. I'm open to it, right? I am open to it. I'm like, yeah, I completely understand you because capitalism is no better than communism. Oh, but communism killed so many people. So has capitalism too, bro. The healthcare system in America, which is a result of capitalism, by the way, I'm not even going to talk much about that, has killed literally millions of people per year. The amount of people who, and people joke about this, people will say like, oh, yeah, I don't go to the doctor. I just pray to God that everything is okay with me because I don't want to pay all that money for freaking healthcare. Yeah. That's not a joke. That's actually real. Even with me, it's somewhat the same. I'm like, shit. I hope I'm good. I hope I'm good. Seriously. So, like, I will never understand the logic of privatized hospitals. Like, what? That's mad. That's all a result of capitalism.
Were that for socialism to be revived after the collapse.
But this is why I don't like the Soviet Union. Okay? This is why I don't like the Soviet Union. Okay? I really don't like the Soviet Union. Because like I said, the Soviet Union it wasn't even like, it did use some aspects of communism, yes. But it wasn't really communism. Like, it just became a ultra authoritarian state that really and truly nobody kind of didn't have any freedom, right? Russia is a lot different from that. Russia is a lot more free than Soviet Union. That is a fact. Russia is capitalist now. The Soviet Union Russia, Soviet Union, just so different.
Lapse of the Soviet Union, it needed to abandon dictatorship, authoritarianism, the we are smarter than thou and know what is best for you attitude. Disagree with his political convictions all you want, but he is very much right about the fundamental causes of the collapse of the Soviet Union. And these causes, I believe, can be attributed to many states built on revolutionary elites and top-to-bottom revolutions. As an example, look at the growing resentments and growing secular attitudes amongst common Iranians directed against the forced religiosity of their regime. States founded on authoritarianism continue that legacy, even as democracy settles back in, however on a fragile base. As an example of that, it is no coincidence that Greece has the highest police brutality in Europe, as its police force, for decades, was used as a brutal tool of silencing dissent by various military dictatorships. People resent being forced, and the way governments, states, and state institutions come to be and how they are built heavily influence how politics is conducted. The strict secularization of Turkey was by and large enforced, and therefore people, especially in rural, poor conservative communities, started to increasingly resent it. But unlike the Soviet Union, democracy eventually had to come. Ataturk demanded it before his death. And there was a growing dissatisfaction with many of the policies of the Republican People's Party, which led to the creation of the Democratic Party in 1946, founded and led by Adnan Menderes, who is often referred to today as the first Islamist. But that is not really true, or at least there's far more nuance to it than simply that. When people hear the word Islamism, they often tend to think of this, or that. When I hear the word, I think of this, a broad field of divergent political interpretations and movements who try to justify their political agenda and authority through the Islamic religion. And Islamism in Turkey is very different from Islamism in Iran or Islamism in Saudi Arabia or even Islamism in Egypt. The story of Turkish Islamism begins with a man called Said Nursi, a Kurdish cleric in Turkey who, during the Young Turk era, wrote reform pieces on adapting Islam into a modern age through what he called science for theologists and religion for scientists. He became part of the Young Turk government, was captured by the Russians during the First World War, escaped during the Russian Revolution, and returned to Turkey. During Ataturk's rule, he retreated into the isolation of the mountains of Anatolia to think, write, and formulate ideas. He was put on trial several times, charged with attempting to undermine the Republic. He continued writing and founded the Nurkuluk movement. He believed that Islam would have to adapt to the demands of a modern world and accept some concessions to democratic forms of governance, but still demanded the establishment of a unified Islamic state under Sharia with Mecca as a capital. This movement and his writings would form the basis from which the modern Islamist movements of Turkey would evolve. And Said Nursi through his support behind Adnan Menderes when the first elections came in 1946. The ruling Prime Minister İnönü pulled a trick by holding the first elections merely 2 months after the founding of the Democratic Party, guaranteeing him a victory as Menderes could not organize a sufficient campaign in time. But 4 years later, during the next election of 1950, Adnan Menderes became the first democratically elected Prime Minister of Turkey. Menderes came from a wealthy family of landowners in Edirne, and to think of him as just an Islamist is a false description. His opposition was mainly to the economic policies of the Republican Party. He was in most points an advocate of conservative liberal economic policies, the deregulation of the economy, the removal of subsidies, the cutting of the welfare state, privatizing national industries, and stepping away from state-guided planned economics. The support base of his Democratic Party were large landowners and the newly forming industrialists and business owners of the newly created urban and metropolitan areas. The idea that Menderes was an Islamist stems from his campaign promises to permit the practicing of Islam in public and permit it to regain a cultural relevance again. In no way did Menderes, throughout his terms as Prime Minister, ever challenge the separation of religion and state itself. He undid the ban on the call to prayer. He permitted the broadcasting of religious messages on radio, which had been banned by Ataturk. He introduced religion as a subject in the school curriculum with the caveat that parents could decide to reject it for their child, and permitted the opening of religious schools under strict government supervision. He also lifted Ataturk's ban on the building of new mosques and churches. These changes were marketed under the motto of "Return to Islam," but were in no way an attempt of re-Islamization of society. The Democratic Party, from a modern perspective, had more in common with conservative parties around the world. Liberal economic policies of deregulation, cutting off welfare spending, in combination with religious moral overtones. His economic policy.
Okay, so he's just what's the word? Because when I first reacted to Ataturk, like banning like all that stuff, I was kind of like, whoa, what the hell? And I was like, whoa, that seems kind of like, I understand why he did it, but I was like, at first, like my first initial reaction, I was like, whoa, that seems kind of a bit, you know, off the rails. You know what I mean? Yeah, like that stuff shouldn't be banned. I'm pretty sure I said that in my last parts of this series. Like that stuff should not be banned. Just like let people practice religion if they want. He's just allowing people to just have a choice now instead of just outright freaking banning it. You know what I mean? So yeah. I see what he's doing.
Initially bore fruit. Productivity increased, economic growth increased, and large parts of the Turkish industry modernized. This economic success in large parts modernized the Turkish economy and brought more capital to the country. But it also sowed the seeds of his downfall. His trade deals and economic modernization policies were mainly focused on the agricultural sector. He opened deals with the United States that allowed for the import of modern American farming tools such as tractors, to build a modern, mass-production agriculture industry, no longer focused on domestic food production, but the export of enormous quantities of cheap fruits and vegetables to Europe. But only a few Turkish farmers could actually afford those, mostly only wealthy large landowners, like Menderes himself. The result of this was that small farmers went bankrupt and then sold their small farms to large landowners, who then became even larger large landowners, who then became even richer by exporting produce abroad, which then caused domestic food prices to skyrocket, then causing the wealth inequality to go through the roof, as hundreds of thousands of unemployed, bankrupted farmers and farm laborers flooded the cities and urban areas looking for work, of which there was barely any left, which combined...
Bam, capitalism for you folks. This is all capitalism. You know, it's funny, right? Because communism, if this was communism, people would be like, oh my gosh, guys, look, communism bad, communism bad. But whenever people like say shit like this, right, about capitalism, like you don't really see anyone like pointing it out, like, oh yeah, capitalism. Like, you don't see that, guys. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is why I'm not like, I don't really call myself a capitalist. I really don't.
The fact that his government had cut down the social security net created a socio-political environment that one could call gigantic clusterfudge. 70% of the Turkish population had been small farmers or part-time workers on large farms, and the vast majority of them were suddenly made redundant. These flooded the cities in large slums called gecekondu, which is a term made up of the Turkish words for gece and kondu, meaning built overnight. These slums were utterly miserable, built on thin brick walls or even just out of clay. No heating, no running water, lack of basic sanitation, crime, unemployment. Life was simply harsh and miserable for those confined in such places like the Istanbul suburb of Kasimpasha, which is barely a stone throw away and within sight of the wealthy districts of the city. In Kasim Pasha, the son of such a poor family, a certain Recep Tayyip Erdogan spent his childhood selling postcards, receiving regular brutal beatings by his father, and dreaming of being a football player. Menderes had a huge problem of his own making at his hands. He had been elected by and large by poor farmers who he had won by promising and giving them their religion, and he had then proceeded to make most of them unemployed. By 1955, Turkey had been plunged into a severe economic crisis, and he needed a solution to this problem, and the solution he found was to blame minorities. Menderes took advantage of escalating tensions between
Oh my god! Yo, that took like a second to process in my head, bro. Holy shit. Yo, that was funny. That was funny. That was funny, bro. Holy crap. Now, you know, the reason why it's funny is because this is so true for so many things, bro. I swear. I said this before in my, I can't pronounce the name, but that Turkish song reaction that I did, is the group, the band who was Susaname, or I don't know how to pronounce that. But like that song, man. I'm probably gonna link it at the end of this video. That Turkish group who was like singing controversial stuff. I was like, hell yeah, bro. Freaking hell. Why is my mixer? Okay. But freaking I pointed out, because they was talking about like racism and people like coming to extremism. I said that people like tend to just blame like a lot of these racist people, like these racist Europeans. They're just racist because they're just using like black people as a scapegoat. They're just racist because they're also sexually miserable as well. I'm not the only one who says this. Anyone with half a brain. There's this YouTuber who has like a good couple 100,000 subscribers. Bad Empadanda, whatever the hell his name is. He's also political type, like similar content to me. But like, yeah, like he also like pointing this out too. Like these people are literally just racist, and because they're just sexually miserable. Their lives are just pretty bad, just really and truly suck. So they just take out their anger on black people. They're just racist. You know, it's a scapegoat. Literally, like black people is just their scapegoat. You know, I don't know. It's a whole psychological thing behind it, but yeah. People just tend to blame like minorities for a whole bunch of things as a scapegoat a lot. So that's why I laughed at that shit, because it's even now today, this is like still so true, honestly. And a lot of people are also just like racist, like when I say people, I'm talking about these like stupid freaking like, oh my god, save Europe motherfuckers. They're also just like racist because they just feel threatened. Like they just feel threatened. Like they can't get play, so they want to like gatekeep like these girls for themselves because they're not really attractive enough to attract them on their own. So they usually just like racist for that too. Something that I've also noticed. This is why when I see shit like don't mix your dirt with snow on TikTok and Instagram and all that stupid shit, I'm just like, damn, bro, how insecure do you have to be? It's literally, bro, like, are you that insecure, like, that you're trying to stop white women from liking whoever the hell they want? Like, really, bro? Like, you feel that threatened, or you just can't attract your own kind of women that you need to try and forcefully convince and bullshit white women to don't mix stone with dirt, you know? Because, oh my gosh, dude. Because you trying to keep some for, dude, trying to keep some for yourself, man. That's just insane. I find it hilarious, though. The racism is hilarious. Guys, if you're black or you're a minority or anything, and you see someone like being racist to you, just laugh. I'm telling you, just laugh with them. Bro, just laugh with them. Like, anytime, because I deal with racism like here and there. I do. Sometimes I get like racism in my comments. Not that much anymore. But whenever I deal with like racism, like in my comments, online, or in real life, honestly, racism that I deal with in real life, that's a whole different story. I ain't gonna lie to you. I'm gonna keep my mouth shut on that. Because that's a whole different thing that I gotta talk about later. But whenever I deal with that shit, bro, I just laugh. And when these like motherfuckers see that I'm laughing, and they're like, wait, he doesn't give a shit. It's like they just it's like their brains just short circuit. I'm not even kidding. Like, it's genuinely like hilarious just looking at their heads and their face like, shit, he's not getting angry. Wait, he's not offended. What do I do? You know? So that's my tip for you. If you see anyone being racist to you, just literally embrace it. Literally, bro. Embrace that shit.
Greeks and Turks in Cyprus to rile up xenophobic mobs amongst the impoverished directed against Christians and Jews. At the peak of this toxic campaign stood the Istanbul pogroms of 1955, in which angry mobs set fire to and vandalized dozens of Christian churches, foundations, schools, as well as synagogues and non-Muslim cemeteries. Large parts of the last remnants of the Greek minority fled to Greece, and 15 people were killed. However, this campaign strategy, if you can even call it that, got him re-elected, but it also brought him under the increasing suspicion of the army, whose generals saw in this riling up of religious hatred and violence against non-Muslims, which they literally had to stop by rolling up tanks in Istanbul to stop the rioting mobs, as a grave attempt at undermining the secular institutions of the state. They were also increasingly uncomfortable with the economic chaos and saw his economic deregulation reforms as a massive failure. During Menderes' second term in office, the situation worsened. Unemployment kept rising. Now even the urban middle classes that had been built before him started losing their jobs and inflation skyrocketed. He was being questioned everywhere and the opposition had a field day. Menderes reacted by seizing ever-increasing control of public broadcasting, turning it into a propaganda tool that exclusively broadcast material in his favor, clamping down with state repression against opposition members, clamping down with police brutality against protesters, as well as shutting down newspapers and journalists that dared to criticize him. And in an attempt to regain the masses of unemployed former farm workers and farm laborers who had voted for him before, he promised to lift more secular restrictions on Islam. It was then when Menderes made his final mistake. After the army chief of staff, General Kemal Gürsel, expressed his displeasure at the increasing state of the country, Menderes fired him and threatened to seize the army's constitutional political powers as the protectors of the republic which Ataturk had given to them. Gösel organized a coup that overthrew Menderes in 1960. He was put on a show trial and charged with undermining the republic, sentenced to death and hanged with several of his ministers. In a gruesome spectacle, the army had pictures taken of his body as it hung from the gallows to be published in Turkish newspapers. There are many videos out there by idiots, but also by people who should know better, claiming that all the military coups in Turkey happened to clamp down on Islamists. And that is simply not true, for later coups in particular. But with this one here, it is worth pointing out that the reasons are not as easy to pin down. You could blame the lifting of the restrictions on religion, but those liftings of restrictions were minimal and didn't challenge the secular nature of the republic. You could just as much blame the catastrophic consequences of an overly zealous liberal economic policy of deregulation. You could blame Menderes' xenophobia-built re-election and increasing despotism, but you could also blame that he tried to subdue the army under the power of a civilian government. Or maybe it's all of these reasons combined. Half a century later, the remains of Menderes would be exhumed to be buried in a large tomb, and a generation of Islamist politicians would rewrite much of his history, mostly leaving out all the ugly bits, and declare him a martyr of democracy. There is, however, one important and enduring legacy of Menderes' government, something that you could call a politics of revenge. Menderes had shamelessly abused the power he had as prime minister to shut down newspapers, crack down on opposition as much as he could get away with, and use public broadcasting for his own propaganda. He wasn't a dictator, but with declining popularity he became increasingly despotic. From this moment on, almost every prime minister who would follow him would do the same. The institutions of governance, intent to be impartial, would be increasingly used to exert revenge against political opponents, silence the press, and spread propaganda by whatever party was in charge. Turkey had several military coups in its history, but one often overlooked fact is that the army never seized control of state affairs. The generals always underwent the same ceremony, almost as if there was a set of state protocols for doing a coup. They would arrest all members of the government, seize control of all government institutions, and then gather at the Atatürk mausoleum in Ankara to salute and bow before his grave, in a proclamation that his legacy had been restored. Then they always handed government power over to a civilian government in an election. The post-coup constitution of 1961 is widely regarded to have been the most democratic constitution the country ever had, as it was the first to separate powers within the republic, and made the right to protest and the right to strike constitutionally protected rights. But even this couldn't hide the fact, made evident by the coup of the previous year, that the army had enormous power over the state. Subsequent governments would continuously raise the salaries of generals in hopes of avoiding a coup. The military budget kept rising and rising to appease the army, but not all of it went into actually buying military equipment or modernizing the army. By the 1970s, the Turkish army's pension fund, Oyak, became one of the most powerful economic institutions of the country, with investments in 60 major corporations in sectors such as banking, steelworks, mining, and energy, with annual profit margins of up to $1 billion. This gave the Turkish army, which officially was to be kept out of economic policy, a degree of influence within the economy. The army also didn't cancel any of the religious liberalizations that Menderes had conducted, probably hoping that with this measure the religious needs of the conservative population would be satisfied, and no more demands for lowering restrictions on religion would be made. The elections of 1961 brought the Republicans back in charge, but they lost the next election to the Justice Party, which was basically just the reincarnation of the Democratic Party. This set the tone for one defining political binary of the Turkish Republic for decades to come. The two main political forces of the country, a western coastline of wealthier cities and urban areas economically orientated around industry sectors, service sector and tourism, which was secular and politically liberal and left-leaning, and the eastern Anatolian countryside. The economy there mainly revolved around agriculture and mining, very religious and politically right-wing and conservative. The 1960s would also start another chapter in Turkish history that would significantly reshape its own and foreign societies. Anverbepolitik, As the Turkish economy was in turmoil, the German economy was booming. At one point, there were simply more jobs than there were Germans, resulting in a German policy of opening to foreign labor within the German economy. Between the 1950s and 1973, Germany imported hundreds of thousands of Spaniards, Italians, Greeks, and Turks to work as laborers in the German manufacturing sector. For the Turkish government, this was beneficial. They could send their unemployed abroad and thereby lower the unemployment rate at home. They also believed that these laborers would come back home after 5 to 10 years as educated mechanics and engineers to help the Turkish economy. Several hundred thousand did, but neither Germany nor Turkey anticipated that several hundred thousand would also stay in Germany and become part of the German social framework, thereby tying the German and Turkish culture and societies closer together. Turkish society in general had undergone some dramatic...
Is that where all these memes of freaking Turks in Berlin apartment, or is that where that freaking meme comes from? I always used to freaking wonder where that meme came from.
changes as the first generation of republic-born citizens reached adulthood, higher educated, more confident in political convictions and beliefs, and willing to express those. 555K was the name of a protest movement against Menderes that Menderes had attempted to shut down. Turks were now willing and ready to go out onto the streets and protest what they perceived to be social injustices. What consequently developed was an increasingly pluralistic society. But don't confuse pluralism with diversity. Diversity as a political term only recently appeared as a descriptor and measure of the multitude of differing cultural and religious backgrounds within a society. Pluralism, however, is the existence of a multitude of competing political beliefs within a social framework that allows for all to be equally expressed. That pluralism is essential within a democratic society for it to function, and it increasingly showed itself especially in the liberal West. Labor unions, student organizations, public political discourse. Turkish society throughout the 1960s became increasingly more politically active. Meanwhile, in the East, society, however, became more politically reclusive. Whereas the West found itself more tied into Europe, both culturally and politically, the East saw itself as cut off and left behind. In his book, Understanding Turkey, Gerhard Schweitzer describes a society in Eastern Anatolia that begrudged the fact that nobody spoke Arabic anymore, that saw itself as cut off from the Arab-Islamic cultural sphere that it wished to be part of. A land in which people went to mosques to listen to Arab sermons, even though none of them even spoke Arabic anymore. A land where the devoutest Muslims learned to memorize the entire Quran in Arabic despite not even speaking Arabic, and therefore not even knowing the meaning of what they had memorized. In its first 20 years, Atatürk's republic produced...
I still don't understand how people do that. I will never understand how people do that, bro.
A generation that saw itself as modern and tied into a more global politique as part of the Western world, but it also produced a generation that saw itself as divorced from its cultural homeland and sphere against its own will. Pluralism may have arrived in Western Turkey, but it hadn't in the East, where the religious conservatives saw themselves as increasingly marginalized and excluded from the wider socio-political and cultural conversation. And then, everything blew up. And it happened where you probably didn't expect it to. The year 1968, with all its riots and protests around the world, hit Turkey like a bomb. Students and left-wing workers rioted throughout the streets of Istanbul. Marxist pamphlets, papers, and other material were in wide circulation, and even though the Communist Party was officially banned, there were simply too many for the police to arrest. Tensions escalated when the US...
I swear, why can't people do this more? Why can't people do this more? I swear, do you know how much we would be able to achieve if everyone just like grouped together and just united as a force against like just to achieve some type of goal? Literally, like the whole phrase of there's just too many of us. They can't all take us all down, right? But no, people just want to sit their asses at home, and this is why nothing is. It's why everything sucks. Honestly, quite literally, it's why everything sucks today. Really and truly. Now you might be living in a country where it doesn't suck, but the Western world is why everything sucks. No one wants to do anything. No one wants to group together and do anything, bruh. Everyone thinks that, oh, I'm too insignificant. Yo, you know something that blows my mind is how everyone for some reason has like there's this like freaking narcissistic epidemic going around, which is hilarious because I'm narcissistic as shit. And everyone thinks that they're like the main character, right? Everyone thinks that they're like special. Everyone thinks that they're like them, you know what I mean, right? But when it comes to shit like this here, trying to fix a problem that needs to be fixed. No, I'm too insignificant. Oh no, I don't care about whatever is going on in politics. I can't do anything about it. Oh, I can't do nothing. Well, you ever thought about just banding together? Oh, I can't change the system. There's nothing we can do. Like working, for example, working. Okay, in the Western world, especially America, I'm just gonna use America for this example. Everyone is complaining about the job market. The job market is horrendous. Okay, for vast majority of Americans. Okay, ever since 2008. Okay, the pay is horrendous. Most Americans are not getting paid how much they're supposed to be getting paid. Okay, most Americans are basically just indentured servants, which is literally just a form of slavery, by the way. And I'll see that all these Americans complaining about it, right? And it's like, okay, vast majority of Americans are having these problems, right? Why don't all of them just band together and just stop working? It'll force the damn corporations who are slaving people away to stop being greedy. If everyone just decided to just stop working. And you know what's funny? This actually did happen. So before you come in my comments and say that, oh, you're spouting nonsense, you're spouting a whole bunch of shite. No, this did happen. I remember a good couple years back. This happened with, was it Starbucks? I'm pretty sure it was Starbucks, where literally like all the workers, it was either Starbucks or a different company. Like they all just literally banded together and they just stopped working. They just stopped working because they were getting paid too low. And it was so effective that they, like, bro, they even had a Reddit. They even had a whole Reddit for them to, this is where they would band together and keep communication with all each other and plan their plans for this type of shit, bro. Because they had demands. And what, was it Starbucks? I'm pretty sure it was Starbucks, but it was at a company. I do know that. And the workers went on a strike. And it forced, I'm pretty sure it was Starbucks, but it forced said company to actually give in to their demands. Okay? So, yes, this shit is possible. This shit is very possible. Like, that just blows my mind. It blows my mind how, like, people, like, everyone is so freaking narcissistic. Everyone thinks they're special. Everyone thinks that they're gonna freaking be, like, famous or whatever the hell. Like, everyone's just so full of themselves. But when it comes to actual matters, like, your job, which is going to affect your life because most people are going to work. Oh, yeah, I don't care about politics, man. I don't care about it, bro. I don't care about it. I'm just one person. Oh, my vote doesn't count. That's another one I hear too in America. My vote doesn't count, so I don't really care. What? And then they'll go and complain and say, oh my god, everything sucks, everything's bad. Bruh.
Sixth Fleet was stationed in Istanbul. A group of radical leftist students kidnapped family members of US stationed soldiers in Turkey. This, combined with the continuing economic decline, gave the Turkish army a new cause for a coup. The army overthrew the government, arrested the student leaders, and had several of them hanged. But this, unlike the last time, did nothing to calm the situation down. The students now had martyrs, and the 1970s would become a decade of vicious violence and almost civil war. And another conflict also flared up again during the early 1970s. Greece had been ruled by a fascist military junta known as the Rule of the Free Colonels for the previous years. Throughout the last decades, governance in Greece had switched between various far-right leaders, and the fascist junta of 1974 was probably one of the single most hated governments Greece had ever had. It was extremely authoritarian, imprisoning people for the most minor of offenses, utterly and completely paranoid of the society it ruled, challenging its rule rule, it lashed out with extreme measures to such an extent that it banned public dancing and music, even kicking Greek musicians out of the country into exile. And when Greeks did protest against their regime, like the students at the Athens Polytechnic, the regime rolled over them with tanks. The only reason this regime was in charge, and the only reason the people of Greece still somewhat tolerated it, was because it claimed to be the only regime that could win a war against the Turks. It is easy to forget today that after the end of the Second World War, right up to the early 2000s, the relationship between Greece and Turkey was more comparable to the relationship between Pakistan and India or Israel and Iran than anything else. The two almost constantly seemed to be at the brink of war, and the sizable amount of that conflict revolved around the island of Cyprus, off the coast of southern Anatolia, its population being 1/3 Turkish and 2/3 Greek. Being that it was once part of the British Empire and the British fucked up almost every single decolonization they did, the place was left in a clusterfudge in the 1950s that resulted in conflict between the Turks and Greeks. This drew both countries into this conflict, with a war over Cyprus that the Turks won and occupied the north of the island, which was such an embarrassment to the Greek fascist junta, who, remember, the sole justification for existing was that they claimed to be the only ones who could beat the Turks in war, that they were overthrown over a single night by a Greek people who had enough of them. These events may seem irrelevant.
Yeah, exactly. This goes back to me. I believe in authoritarianism. I don't really fucking care about democracy. And this is my point here. This is a very valid point, right? Some people look at me crazy when I say, like, I believe in, like, autocracy. I believe that I'm more so a monarchist, really and truly. I believe in monarchy. I don't care what type of monarchy. I think monarchy is the best way. I do also think that absolute monarchy can work as well. But yeah, I am a monarchist, and people say, like, oh, but authoritarianism, bro. Dictatorship, bro. Oh my gosh, so bad. Dude, when you're an authoritarian government, I don't care what type of it could be any type of government. It could be monarchy, it could be oligarchy, it could be any type. But when you're an authoritarian government, you have all the power. Cool. But when shit hits the fan, everyone's gonna blame you. Okay? If you're not doing your job properly, everyone's gonna get rid of you. Everyone's gonna get rid of you. I'm telling you, I will always stand by this. The people have the power to change whatever government they want. I'm telling you, governments do not have as much power as you think they do. I'm telling you. And every authoritarian government knows that. Every authoritarian government, I'm not pinpointing, I'm not singling out any government, I'm not singling out any country, I'm just saying in general, every authoritarian country, every authoritarian person, every authoritarian government knows damn well they are at the mercy of the people. When you are an authoritarian figure, you are always at the mercy of the people. And this is why I support authoritarian government. This is why I think authoritarian governments like absolute monarchy or just any other type of authoritarian government can be a superior form of government other than democracy. Honestly. Because with everyone looking at you, okay? With every single one looking at you, you gotta do shit good. Because if you don't do shit good, you're gonna go bye-bye and you're probably gonna get unalived. Yeah. Yeah. Like, what was that song from Assassin's Creed Unity? A million march will always be stronger than any gun. Okay? So, it is not ludicrous for me to support a strong figurehead in a government. It is not ludicrous at all. And really and truly, guys, I've lived through democracy all my life, both in Barbados and both in America. And democracy, it's the most common system. So we've all lived through democracy. Not all of us, of course. But you know, just witnessing how shit doesn't get done because of the stupid people who are too busy bickering within government, too busy worrying about votes, man. Votes. Oh, I gotta appeal to the people to get more votes. All these people, how many times have somebody say, I'm gonna do this for the people, vote for me, and they just say it out of their ass and they actually don't do it. They just lie to you. I mean, really, guys, democracy, it just, in my opinion, democracy just kind of really just leads to a very inefficient government. And it just slows everything down, right? This is why I believe in autocracy. This is why I believe in authoritarianism. This is why I am a monarchist, okay? Although I do support constitutional monarchy as well, but I'm just saying, like, I'm a monarchist in it that I could also tolerate a freaking like absolute monarchy as well, right? This is why, like I said here, I have this flag. Okay, this is a variant of Barbados's flag, but this flag is supposed to symbolize the fact that I am a monarchist. And actually, my country used to be a monarchy until 2021. I said this before, but many people don't know that. So I actually did grow up in a monarchy system, and I saw how it worked, and that led me to become a monarchist. Okay, I'm a big monarchist. I'm very patriotic for the British monarchy, because, well, that used to be our monarchy too up until 2021. That's why I have this portrait of Her Late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. If you haven't noticed that above the map of Barbados, which is my country, there's symbolism to this. Okay, the monarchist flag that I have here, with Queen Elizabeth above Barbados to symbolize how she was symbolize the fact that it's supposed to symbolize how she used to be the queen of Barbados and how she used to be the monarch of Barbados. Okay, guys, so trust me. Okay, you see in my videos where I have these portraits, and I have a bunch of these portraits in my room. Costing me a lot of money, but there is symbolism to this, okay? There is symbolism to it, okay? So yeah, this is why I have that here. And in fact, actually, you probably noticed that I had the Russian Empire flag as well. Yes, I purposely chose the Russian Empire flag because to also symbolize the fact that I am a monarchist, okay? So yes, that's why you see me with all of these portraits and these monarchist flags and these czars and, well, Her Majesty the late Queen Elizabeth II, whom I was deeply patriotic for, of course. So yeah, I didn't just put this here just, I mean, for sure, yes, but there is a symbolism to it, okay? So I just thought that I had to explain it, okay? I had to explain it sometime, right? Like, I told myself I'm gonna explain it on one of my videos. But here, this is why I have this stuff here, okay? So so I don't know if you guys even realized that was the Queen Elizabeth II. It was her when she was younger. But yeah, that's why I have that flag, the variant, the St. George's Cross of the Barbados variant flag. Most British Commonwealth countries who are ex-British colonies typically have it because it's, their heritage, with Barbados right there next to it. I don't know if you guys even noticed that. With what was I saying? Oh yeah, with Barbados on the bottom, and the Queen, the late Queen, because she's dead, above Barbados, symbolizing her being the monarch and her being the queen. Of course she's going to be above Barbados, right? So yeah, the figurehead, the head of the state.
To you, but they became of vital importance 30 years down the road. When Turkey throughout the late 1980s would try to join the European Union, the one thing standing in their way was Cyprus, and as long as Turkey will not get out of Cyprus, it will never join the European Union. Meanwhile, in Turkey itself, things seem to be completely falling apart. 1965
Turkey
two new
doesn't need the
forces in
EU.
the Turkish parliament. The MHP with 2.2%, the Turkish Communist Party with 5%, and the Socialist Turkish Workers' Party won 3%. Collectively, these three made up barely 10% of national support, but they would still dominate the 1970s. The MHP was the party of the previously mentioned Alparslan Türkes. It combined various elements of ethno-nationalist viewpoints with Islamic religious conservative social doctrine to form an Islamo-fascist movement. Even though you have more than likely never heard of the Turkish far right, you have probably still heard of some of the things they have done or encountered some of their symbols. For example, Mehmet Ali Aka, who attempted to assassinate the Pope in 1981, was a member of the
Holy, that guy's a
far-right
Giga Chad, bro.
organization, which is closely tied to the MHP. Wolves, especially wolf mothers, are sacred animals within ancient nomadic Turkic mythology, where wolves led nomadic armies in victory against the Chinese. This movement combined various aspects of Turkic cultural, historical, and mythical identities into something that is, I'm not entirely sure. Fascist movements in general have a weird habit of mixing the mythical with reality, creating a weird fudge together of political identities of contradictions. Communism in Turkey, just like communism everywhere, isn't as popular as the communists like to believe it is, so they resorted to violence and riots. The far right also noticed that they would never really ever get a chance to be in government, so they also resorted to violence. The result was that the 1970s were dominated by continuous terrorist attacks and violence at the hands of extremist elements of the far right and the far left, which would cost the lives of up to 5,000 people from 1975 to 1980. Far-right extremists would attack Alawites, Kurds, Christians, Jews, and left-wing institutions, to which the far left would react with attacks against the state, politicians, the army, and the far right. Within this chaos, two events would stand out as defining moments of modern Turkey: the Taksim Massacre and the Maras Massacre. All these decades ago, after the first attempt to overthrow Ataturk, the traditional workers' parade on the 1st of May had been banned. But in 1975, it was made legal again, which the Turkish left took advantage of by organizing massive parades of hundreds of thousands of their followers in Istanbul. When the parade reached Taksim Square, unknown right-wing terrorists shot into the crowds with machine guns. In the resulting chaos, dozens were killed and hundreds injured. Nobody was ever arrested or trialed for this attack, and the Taksim Square became a symbol for left-wing Turks ever since, where they traditionally gather to protest. In Maras, after several left-wing terrorist attacks, far-right politicians blamed the local Alawite population. The tensions between the communities of the town rose and rose up to the night of the 23rd of December 1978, when a group of unknown men went through the city marking the homes of Alawites with red paint. Throughout the next days, incited by imams who had preached against the unbelievers, crowds of people rampaged through the streets, setting fire to those homes, dragging the people out and killing them, while the state did nothing to stop any of it.
Wow.
The Alawites are a religious community that originated in 7th century Baghdad. The name comes from Muhammad's cousin Ali, who Shia Muslims venerate as a martyr and rightful caliph who was denied by betrayal. The Alawites worship Ali as a prophet after Muhammad. They reject Sharia and most texts of the Quran as falsified after Muhammad by warlords. The religious preachings come from community leaders who pass down religious sermons by word of mouth and not in written text. They see pre-Islamic prophets like Jesus on an equal standing to Muhammad. They adopted Christian and Jewish religious practices, such as celebrating Christmas, and they even have religious rituals involving the drinking of wine, and drinking of alcohol is not forbidden for Alawites. As you can imagine, all of this is nothing but the most extreme of heresy to most Muslims, and consequently the Alawites spent most of their entire existence as a community being persecuted and maligned. Openly practicing your faith was equal to a death sentence. Under Ataturk's republic, the Alawites blossomed as a community, finally coming forth out into the open. Alawites were free to worship, and many became great admirers of Ataturk and his reforms. However, by the 1970s, the old hatreds started to return, mainly reinstigated by the far right and the religious, even to this day. The violence gradually escalated more and more over the course of several decades. Killings between radical groups became a daily routine, and as the 1970s came to a close, it seemed as if the country was about to collapse into civil war. It was then, in 1980, that General Evren Kenan led another military coup. The public at first cheered the army, but what happened next would deeply scar Turkish society. The army seized control of the courts and executive and launched a massive purge. Under the pretense of cleansing society of communism, tens of thousands of Turks were arrested, tortured, and thousands were killed and disappeared. Left-wing parties were forbidden, cultural centers were shut down, philosophy and politics classes were banned from the nation's universities, debating politics was forbidden at all educational institutions, dozens of prisons were built to stuff the thousands of arrested citizens into. Labor unions, organized labor movements forcefully dismantled, and the conflict with the Kurds flared up into a full-blown war as the army engaged in a crackdown, marking the beginning of the Turkish-Kurdish war that still continues to this day. General Kenan was a symptom of
It's over now. It's over now. I mean, obviously this video was made in the past, but I did saw in the news that the Kurds, just GG, bro. Just called it GG.
Similar things
so,
were happening in Argentina
yeah.
and Chile at the same time. And in many ways, Evren Kenan was the Pinochet of Turkey, as he proclaimed to exterminate communism in Turkey forever. The waves of arrests, torture, and state killings he signed off to targeted far more people from all walks in life, all across the political left of center. People were arrested and tortured for merely buying foreign books and magazines that the regime used to be subversive. And to this day, numbers of those who disappeared between 1980 and 1982 protest each weekend, demanding to know what happened to their children.
Yo, shit, I got goosebumps on my skin, bro. That's...
General Evren Kenan eventually had to stand trial for what he had done, and even though some in the extremist right may still praise him to this day, most Turks think of him as a butcher and mass murderer. As the torturing and murdering was being done, the generals and colonels of the army faced a problem. How does one exterminate communism? Communism is an idea, and even if you kill all those who hold these beliefs, who is to say that they won't reappear in other people's minds?
You can't destroy belief. You can't.
The army needed an ally, a new set of ideas, something with which they could combat communism in people's hearts and minds. And it was then, in search of that ally, that the generals made a decision that decades down the road would lead to their downfall. They went to the mosque.
Yo, I swear, I love this series. I love this series, bro. Yo, this series is amazing. I'm telling you, I do enjoy these Turkey reactions, bro. It is so splendid. It is wonderful, honestly. If you have any more Turkey reactions like this, that you would love to see my reaction to, comment it in the comments below. This was a suggestion by me, this video right here. And a lot of people enjoyed me reacting to it, and a lot of people enjoy whenever I do long reactions to Turkey. So yeah, you know, if you made it all the way here too, you made it all the way here, man, you know, subscribe definitely. If you made it all the way here, you know, turn the bell notifications on, because I upload every single day at 10 a.m. You know what I'm saying? And not only that, if you are an active viewer of mine and you have suggestions for me, you know, I haven't done it yet, you know, or you just want my suggestions, you want me to do your suggestions faster, you know, check out my channel membership. It's only 99 cents a month. It's going to be in the pinned comments. You know, watch the video that you get that I put there for you, where I explain all the perks that you get. I'm telling you guys, it is worth it. None of my members are disappointed. Right now, we have 6 members. As I get more members, I will expand the perks and policies of it, guys. But I'm telling you, it is so worth it. And I purposely made it cheap because as I get more people, you know, as I get more subscribers, comments, suggestions, you know, work, college, all that. I'm a very busy person. Plus, I'm literally self-teaching myself a language. Guys, I have shit to do. Okay, I'm telling you guys. So you know, it's a connection. Okay, it's an outlet. Okay, for you to stay connected to me. If you really like my content, you like my reactions, you like my videos, it's a way for you to stay connected to me, man. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, it's gonna be in the pinned comments, or you could go on my channel page if you're checking out my videos, and you'll see like the join thing, and the video, you could click on the join and the video will be there as well. Okay, thank you for watching and goodbye.